I'm the faculty. Hi, I'm Jennifer Berg. I'm the faculty director of the Graduate Food Studies program at NYU Steinhardt. And also, like you, I'm a proud member of the Steinhardt alumni community, having earned both my MA and PhD here. So I have lots and lots of Violet pride. On behalf of NYU Steinhardt Alumni Relations, I want to welcome you all to Farm to Table Mediterranean Style. And just as a reminder, please feel free to join the chat or the Q&A. You can put some questions in there. My colleagues and I will be monitoring it, and we'll have time at the end of the session for some open dialogue. Okay, so now's the fun part. It is my absolute honor to introduce our two speakers today, Layne Lieberman and Melissa Metrick, who are truly the stars of this afternoon. Melissa Metrick earned her MA in Food Studies at NYU Steinhardt. Prior to graduate school, she developed and operated the farm at Roberta's, that iconic Brooklyn restaurant that started the new trend about farm to table. Melissa also holds a horticulture certificate from the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens. Melissa manages our NYU Urban Farm Lab, which is where she is now. She works with staff, students, and volunteers, crop planning, harvesting, implementing sustainable agricultural practices, which she's been focusing on and working on in this field of urban agriculture for the past 12 plus years, when she started her career volunteering for AmeriCorps, where she taught little children in South Berkeley how to grow and cook healthy food from their school gardens. Along with Melissa today, we have Layne Lieberman. Layne is a globally renowned, award-winning culinary nutritionist and a dietitian. For over 30 years of experience in the supermarket, health, and food fields, Layne has educated the public on how to embrace food, love food, live healthy, vibrant lives. And the awesome part is that she does this without relying on any gimmicks, fads, or superficial food trends. Layne is the real deal. She's a global citizen. She lived in Europe for 2 years, where she fully immersed herself deeply, not just into the food, but into the lifestyle, the values, and the cultures of the people around her. And it was through this intensive and extensive research that she produced this groundbreaking and beautiful, powerful book, Beyond the Mediterranean Diet, which she'll share with us shortly. Layne earned a BS in nutritional biochemistry from Cornell and her MS in clinical nutrition from NYU Steinhardt. You have very likely seen her on television, heard her on the radio, or read her work in numerous national publications. So I am super delighted to turn this over now to my friend and colleague, Layne Lieberman.
Thank you, Jenny. That was very sweet. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here and share a beautiful recipe with you and cook with you and talk about nutrition and food and work with Melissa, who's on the Urban Farm in New York City right now. So we're going to get rolling here. One thing I'd ask everybody to do, hopefully you have your recipe out and you have your ingredients organized and out, because that'll help us get through it. Also, it'd be a good idea to turn on your oven to 375, because we need to preheat that. You can use a toaster oven. You don't need to turn on your large oven, so that we can get going as soon as that oven is preheated. I also wanted to show you my book. It's called Beyond the Mediterranean Diet, European Secrets of the Super Healthy. It's an award-winning book, and it was written while I was abroad living in Europe. After being in the supermarket industry for 20 years, I was intrigued by the lifestyle there and studied the different countries and their cultures, not only their lifestyle, food culture, and looked at all the statistics and saw the benefits of these 3 countries that really have the most incredible health statistics, lowest rates of heart disease, lowest rates of obesity, and the longest lifespans. So the book is really geared about these modern European countries and their healthy lifestyles and dietary secrets, how they maintain their traditions and cultures. They don't give up their food. They love, Italians love their pasta, Swiss love their dairy. The French eat their, drink their wine and eat their cheese, and they maintain these wonderful health statistics. So it talks a lot about that. I also wanted to mention that my son and I, who's an engineer, we developed, and using my nutritional biochemistry skills, a different type of product, not a food product, but we both, I know it has nothing to do with nutrition and food, but we both suffered with something called bruxism, which is grinding of the teeth. That's related to the TMJ joint. And couldn't find any solutions that were organic and natural and helpful. So we developed an OTC drug using 100% botanicals. Everything's plant-based and organic. It's called TJZ Balm. And it's really a wonderful, clean medicine type product. So thank you for listening to that. The next thing I wanted to do before, again, we get started is introduce you again to Melissa Metrick, who is the NYU director of the Urban Farm. And she's on the farm right now, and she's going to tell us about the herbs that we're going to use in cooking and give us some tips on how to harvest those herbs. Thanks,
Great.
Melissa.
Thank you so much, Layne and Jenny, for the introduction. Hi, my name is Melissa Metrick. I'm super excited to join you all here. I am the manager of the NYU Urban Farm Lab within the Nutrition and Food Studies Department in Steinhardt. I also teach a class, Introduction to Urban Agriculture. So we teach a class on the farm at NYU. And I'm just gonna kind of just walk you through the farm really quickly. You have to please excuse the noise. One thing that Jenny kind of always says is that this is the most urban of urban farms. We are on Houston Street in New York City, so we're literally on 6 lanes of traffic. So I'll just begin by showing you the farm really quickly. So we are at the Silver Tower buildings, right on Houston Street. So this is just some of the crops that we started to grow here. And yeah, just a quick walkthrough. You see our garlic growing, and our collard greens and broccoli. And I'm just gonna walk us over to the herb bed really quickly. And so that I will give you a quick guide in how to harvest some of the herbs that Layne's gonna be using. So here's our herb bed, and it's still kind of growing in. We're still a little bit early in our season here. But the first thing that we have is our parsley. So with parsley, what we do is that we're going to continually harvest from this all season long. So pretty much the way to harvest sustainably would be to only harvest a third of the plant. So you could see I have my whole plant right here. Again, I'm sorry for the noise, it's a little loud. And I'm just going to take my scissors. I'm going to think about a third of it. So if there's this much, just gonna kind of pull apart a little bit, so maybe around that much, and I'm gonna actually cut back all the way, if you guys can see that, to the main stem. And Layne, how much parsley are we using today with your recipe?
So we're using 2 tablespoons of parsley, but you know what? If you like more parsley, you can have a little bit more. It's just a guideline.
Great. So we harvested about this much. This is probably about like 2 tablespoons of parsley. And here, I'm just gonna walk over to our basil really quickly. And basil is kind of interesting. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced where you go to the supermarket and you buy a basil plant, and then all of a sudden you just get this really tall, leggy kind of basil. And it's not really like a basil bush that you're used to. And so I'm going to show you how to actually harvest it in a way to create this kind of like more of a basil bush. So we have our, again, one of our kind of tiny basil plants right here. And the way to promote it to grow more like a bush is actually to harvest from the top instead of the bottom leaves. So what we're simply going to do is pinch the top right off. So I go down to the next set of leaves and I just pinch it off right there. And then I'll do that again with this one. And that actually promotes the plant to grow more leaves. So Layne, I'll probably need a little bit more than this, right?
Yeah, probably, because once you chop it up, it gets a little smaller. But, you know, we understand. I have the basil here. It's virtually in my kitchen from the Urban Farm. Thanks, Melissa, for sending it to me.
Great. Yeah. And I love that beautiful. So yeah, that's pretty much just how to harvest some of your herbs sustainably with our basil and our parsley. And I would love now to go ahead and pass it along to Layne so that we could actually get going on this really exciting recipe. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Melissa. And you know, I don't think did we say the name of the recipe? I'm not sure, but it's a panzanella salad. And panzanella salad is an Italian type salad. It's a one meal salad, so it has everything in it that you could possibly need for a delicious, nutritious meal. And it's comes from Italy. And pane means bread, and zanella means basket. So there's bread in the salad. Of course, in Italy, you need to have bread every day. Carbs are very important. So let's start with the first ingredient. I hope everybody has their ingredients and everybody's ready to cook, and the oven is already preheated, because we're going to make croutons. Basically, we call them croutons, which comes from the French, but these are going to be baked pieces of bread that are going to go into the salad. So we start with 3 slices of a sourdough, and this is the recipe calls for whole wheat sourdough. This is actually made with a whole wheat barley flour. It doesn't look whole wheat because it's not dark, but it is made with a whole wheat flour. Not all whole grain flours are dark. One nice thing about sourdough bread is that it produces, the yeast produces lactic acid, and this lactic acid is actually very helpful. It's a fermented product, sourdough bread, and it's really good for your digestive system. So for people that have some types of intolerance to gluten, they may be able to still have sourdough bread, but not people that have celiac disease, because it is made with wheat. And if you have celiac disease, you should avoid all wheat products. The other good thing about sourdough bread is that it acts as a prebiotic in the intestine. And we know that probiotics are so important, but nobody ever talks about prebiotics. In order for our probiotics, which means the good gut bacteria that we need to stay totally healthy, needs to eat good food. And those are called prebiotics in our system. So something like sourdough bread provides good prebiotic into your gut. Now we have our 3 slices of our bread. We need to slice those into 1-inch cubes. So we do so, always use a serrated knife when we're slicing bread. Okay, so we'll slice those. I hope everybody can see. We want to slice them into 1-inch cubes. I hope you're doing it with me. Be careful never to cut your fingers. And then once we have these sliced, I did them all at once to make it quick. We're going to put them on a baking sheet, and we're going to toss it with a tablespoon of olive oil. And olive oil is absolutely a staple in a heart healthy diet. It's been used in the Mediterranean diet since the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. It's called liquid gold in Italy. And we also want to be aware of that there are differences in olive oil, where they come from, how it's harvested, the types of olives. And we can talk more about that if we have time later. I usually buy my olive oil from Italy because I do culinary tours in Italy every year. I run culinary tours for health professionals and people that love to learn, have deep learning about cooking in the Mediterranean diet. We do cheese making, pasta making, focaccia making. We travel to UNESCO sites. We learn a lot about the culture, especially in southern Italy. but they're really well known for their olive oil. And especially in this region called Puglia, they have a specific olive called the Coratina olive that's very rich in polyphenols. And the polyphenols is what gives you that sort of scratchy, almost spicy taste in the back of your mouth. And that's what creates the healthy antioxidants to keep your heart healthy. And it's anti-cancer, healthy heart, all of these things that we must have from our diet. Olive oil is one of them. So it's a good fat to use. I use it in place of almost all fats. This olive oil, because I'm out of my Southern Italian olive oil, comes from Whole Foods, but it is an organic olive oil, and it's good to read the label to see where it comes from. This one is a mix from, and it does show you here that it comes from 3 different countries. And I don't know if you can see that, but it shows ITTN, and I think it's GR. So that's Italy, Greece, and Tunisia. Those are the three blended oils. So even sometimes when it says California, sometimes it's not even California olives. You have to read the back. Sometimes they're blending it with olives from even other countries. Okay, so here we go. A tablespoon of olive oil. And that goes onto our bread. And I'm going to use my hands. They're washed. I hope everybody's washed their hands. And we're just going to make sure that the olive oil gets evenly distributed. And these go into, now they go into the oven, and it goes in, it says 10 minutes, but actually I would do it 8 minutes. One thing I love in my kitchen is to have a timer. So you just press your timer and it goes into the oven. Okay, I actually have them already done because I did them yesterday for us. So those are done, but we'll make sure that you get yours done. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to create the dressing. One thing that's really interesting also about living overseas is that they, especially in Italy, they don't dress anything for you. Vegetables, salads, everything is given to you fresh without dressings, and you get to dress your salads and vegetables at the table, which I love because I'm one of those people that really annoy the waiters when I say, oh, can I have my salad with the dressing on the side? Or can you please put the sauce on the side? Just because the dressings and the sauces are really what gives so much calories to our food. And if we're trying to stay, I love food, I love to eat, but I also want to stay fit and I want to be svelte. And so I try to watch those extra calories. And so by putting dressings and sauces on the side, it really helps a lot. You're in control. The Italians do that naturally. That's why another reason I love Italy so much. Even in France, it's interesting too, because I noticed when I was working with the chefs in the kitchens of France, they put, even those French are known so much for sauces, the sauces go under the food. So you get to taste the sauce, you get to eat your food and determine how much of the sauce you want to eat with your food, which is the way we should do it and the way I cook at home. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is in a large salad bowl. I hope everybody has a large salad bowl. This is really large. Probably you don't need such a large one, but we're going to whisk together the remaining olive oil and vinegar. So the rest of, there's 5 tablespoons total of olive oil. So we just need now 4 more tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm going to put them in here. This salad is already going to be pre-dressed, but it's very light. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and you could do this on the side if you don't want to pre-dress it. I normally do things on the side, as I mentioned earlier. The other ingredient is red wine vinegar. I chose a organic Cabernet Sauvignon wine vinegar, which is made in California. And there's so many different varieties of red wine vinegars to taste and try. And really it's up to you what you like. You can also use balsamic vinegar. They're more aged vinegars than the red wine vinegars. Some people like rice vinegar or apple cider vinegar. Whatever you like is what you should use. I'm going to use this one right now for our recipe because this is more of a traditional vinegar that's used in a panzanella salad. So for the, how much do we need? 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. So hopefully everybody's following. Oops, a little bit more, 1. And actually I did that on purpose. I like a little more vinegar. 2, 3. Nothing has to be exactly as it states in terms of the amounts in a recipe, except when you're baking, things are very different. But when you're cooking, I mean, do things like, if you like things a little more tart, or you want to put a little lemon instead of the vinegar, just be, you know, cooking is an art. Use your creativity, and whatever you like and what you love, put that into your food and people will enjoy it more. Another thing that's very popular in terms of salad dressings, especially in Italy, is that they use a lot of lemon instead of vinegar. So often in southern Italy, you'll see lemon wedges and olive oil on the table instead of vinegar and olive oil on the table. And again, sometimes I put in, I mean, I love lemon, and I think lemon adds so much to so many different recipes and foods. So we just want to whisk together the olive oil and the vinegar just so that it's nicely combined. That's done. Hopefully you guys are doing that along with me. The next thing we need to do is we have to add our chickpeas. And I love all these foods, and sorry if I keep repeating myself, but I love chickpeas. I love all legumes. I eat mostly a vegetarian diet. So plant-based, I'm sure you've all heard of it. And it's so funny because in our country, we hear these kind of buzzwords about diet. Are you plant-based? Are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? In Europe, they don't really go that direction because they're into their culture and traditions, but they've been eating plant-based for centuries. They just don't say we're plant-based or we're following this diet. Especially again, in the Mediterranean and the southern areas, beans, legumes, even in France, I mean, lentils are a staple in the French household. And one of the interesting things, I'm sure you all know that chickpeas are the main ingredient in hummus, which is something that's very common in our society, also from the Mediterranean, different part of the Mediterranean. But what's interesting about chickpeas, they're also called garbanzo beans. You can buy them canned in these kinds of aseptic packages, which I really like, or you can buy them dried and cook them. You soak them and then you need to boil them. It takes a long time, it depends, about an hour. But one thing interesting about garbanzo beans is you should save the liquid. The liquid is called aquafaba, and it's actually been used by chefs more and more as a vegan substitute for egg whites. And it's used to cook. You can use it to extend your eggs. Let's say you're making an egg white omelet or an egg omelet and you want to add more liquid. You can use the liquid. I use it a lot, even in baking. You can use it, add it to make sauces thicker. So I'm going to save some of the liquid, okay? So here we go. You need a colander. So in order to save some of the liquid, just have a bowl under your colander and then you can save it. So I'm going to pour out the chickpeas. And these are organic. I love cooking with organic ingredients. Again, you know, organic has been sort of a buzzword in in the United States as, you know, a trend. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Southern Italy has been growing and harvesting organic for centuries. Why? Because they never could afford the chemicals to use. The farmers were really wealthy and they couldn't afford to buy chemicals from the chemical companies. So, I mean, Italy is one of the largest organic food producers in the world. So, I mean, it's not a trend there, but it tastes, for me, I just feel better. It's like an insurance policy. I like my food to be fresh, free of pesticides, and I feel like it's a good way to go. Okay, so now we have our aquafaba. I don't know if you can see it. We can save that. So I'm going to put it over here. And I'm going to come back with the chickpeas. The recipe calls for 1.5 cups of chickpeas drained and rinsed. I'm not going to rinse them because I don't think we need to here, but here we go. So we're going to put in 1.5 cups into our bowl. This is a 1 cup measuring. I'm using just that for 1.5, and that gives us our chickpeas. The next thing we need to do is add our tuna. And I'm using in this recipe a skipjack tuna. It's a canned tuna. You can use fresh cooked tuna. If you have leftover from the night before, you can create this salad the next day for your family. The reason I choose skipjack, as you can see, it's also called chunk light tuna, is because it's lower in mercury than the very common white tuna that we tend to use more, and that's called albacore tuna. But I will say there are companies now that are actually testing the tuna, albacore tuna, for mercury before they can it. So look for some of those brands. I actually just saw a brand in Costco that's doing that. So if you really like albacore tuna, you can look for those brands. But in general, if you're going to use a lot of albacore tuna, remember that it's a little bit higher, actually significantly higher than a skipjack tuna, because skipjack are smaller fish and they have just less mercury in there. So there's the skipjack, and I buy tuna that has no salt added, and it's packed in water. It's better to buy tuna that has no salt added, so you don't have to rinse it with water to get rid of the salt. It could be very high in sodium. We don't really need to add salt to our foods because our food has natural sodium in it. And if you want things saltier, I'd rather control the salt myself and add a little bit of salt. The other thing about why I purchase water-packed tuna is because there's more omega-3 fatty acids held in the fish when it's packed in water. If it's packed in oil, you're going to lose some of those omega-3 fatty acids. So that's the reason. So let's put I hope everybody has their tuna. Let's put the tuna into our salad bowl, and let's flake the tuna. So make sure that it's flaked. You can do that very easily with a fork, just so that it gets well distributed and everybody gets a good taste of that delicious tuna. Okay, next ingredient is cucumbers, and cucumbers are there's lots of varieties. This is an English cucumber, and it's probably one of the most common cucumbers. It has a smoother skin, so I use this skin because this is an organic one, and it has less seeds in it. But there are lots of varieties, and if you go to a farmer's market, you might see lots of other, the smaller Kirby type cucumbers. I've already chopped up my cucumber, and it calls for 1 cup or 1 large cucumber diced, and here it's already chopped and ready to go. And you can easily do this when you're chopping vegetables. Use a chef's knife rather than a serrated knife. This is better for tomatoes and bread. Okay, so we're going to put our cucumber in, and that's done, and mix it all in there. Okay, the next thing we need to add is our 1/2 cup of radishes. Radishes are I love them. They're so spicy. They add so much flavor. I don't even need to add any pepper because it has that peppery flavor. Something interesting about radishes is that we tend to throw away the tops, which you really don't need to do. You can use these tops in cooking. In fact, last night I took some of the tops and I made an Asian dish, a stir-fry dish, and it just added a nice little flavor to it. So don't throw your tops away, reuse them. Something I learned from the nonas in Italy, they don't like to throw anything away, not even the pasta water. They use that in the sauce. So try to reuse. Everything is valuable in terms of nutrition. Why do we want to throw that away? And it's more sustainable to use everything. So with the radishes, there's, again, so many varieties. Melissa, I've also learned that radishes are a great cover crop. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's cover crops are usually used in gardens and farms for a couple different reasons. One, to keep soil from eroding. Another reason is actually to put nutrients back into the soil. So a lot of times you're growing these cover crops in your off season, or you're growing cover crops in certain plots of land that you aren't growing in that season that are laying fallow. And so when you're about to work the land again, you turn the cover crop in, and it puts nutrients back into the soil. So nitrogen and things like that. And it's actually like a natural fertilizer. So instead of going to the store and buying a fertilizer, you just put cover crop in. And soil erosion is a huge issue. And so it's actually really good to constantly have something growing in your garden beds. So thank you for bringing that up, Layne. That's great. I love that you mentioned that.
And thanks for sharing that information. That's great. And, also radishes, there's daikon radishes that you see a lot in Asian cooking. This is the most common radish, right? Or red radishes. And when you want to prepare your radish, just cut the ends off. Sorry if this is in the way here. And when you're cutting onions, radishes, and so forth, it's always good to cut them in half and lay them flat on your cutting board so that they don't rock and you don't you don't cut your fingers. I also like to chop them one way and then go in the opposite direction. And be careful. It's good to use your knuckles to hold the vegetables stable, especially when you're using when you're cutting or chopping smaller vegetables. It's very easy to cut your fingers there. So again, hopefully everybody's chopping and cutting with us today. And then you can also just give it an extra chop like that if you want them smaller. I really like to chop things up. I like smaller chop because it releases more of the flavors, and that's why I like it. And here I've already measured out a half a cup of chopped radishes. Hopefully you guys are ready to put your radishes into the salad. And that's all done here. Get the right. Okay, so we have our radishes, we have our tuna, our beans, our cucumber, and now we have onion, and we're using red onion. And again, one of my favorite onions, but I also love Vidalia onions, which are from Georgia, because they're sweet. And that's what I love about red onions, because they're so sweet. And I actually always put them in my pasta sauce because it just adds such a nice flavor and sweetness. And so when you're cutting your onion, this calls for a half of onion, just make sure, you take away all of the skin. That's going to kind of give it a papery taste. You want to get rid of that. And let me get rid of these radishes here. And onions sometimes are very difficult to chop for people because they tear there because of the sulfur compounds. For me too. So, I have to do it quickly. Otherwise, what I do is I chop them all at once, and then I put them in vinegar. I take some of that sulfur away. There's another chemical in there that causes that very harsh flavor. So I chop up my onions, and then it's like a pickling. I cover them with vinegar. I put a pinch of salt and a pinch of sugar, and then you can keep them for like 2 weeks, which is great. So you don't always have to prepare them, and you can throw them into salads, stir fries. I mean, they work well even as a condiment if you're cooking chicken or fish or any kind of animal protein. They work for everything. So with our onions, again, when we're chopping our onions, make sure that it's flat. So we have our flat surface, and we want to make sure that we carefully go in one direction and then in the next direction, right? So we want to go one way and then once you have your chop, you can just continue again to take your knife and chop them up as fine as you would like. Okay, so I'm going to use the onions that I already prepared with the vinegar and with the little pinch of salt and sugar. And this is actually a half of an onion. So that's going to go into the recipe as is. Okay, the next ingredient are tomatoes. Again, one of my favorite foods. I eat tomatoes every single day with breakfast. I love them. They're full of lycopene, which is a antioxidant, phytochemical, known to prevent certain cancers, especially prostate cancer and other cancers. But I love them because they taste so good. Italians love them in cooking. They eat them all year round. There's so many different varieties. A lot of the cherry tomatoes are actually heirloom tomatoes. So they've been around for quite a long time. So let's put the tomatoes already weighed out. And I'm going to, you can cut them in half. I'm not going to do that right now, but there's a lot of tomatoes in this recipe. And the reason being is because some of the cooks don't use cherry tomatoes, they just use chopped tomatoes. And it called for 1.5 pounds, and 1.5 pounds of chopped tomatoes are going to be a little less in volume than the cherry tomato.
I know. You gotta poop.
Okay, the next ingredient are Kalamata olives. And Kalamata olives come from Greece. They're full of flesh, so they have a lot of flavor. And again, they're one of my favorite from the Mediterranean, and they add a lot of salty, briny taste, which I love, again, because you don't need to add salt to the recipe. I actually use the liquid. As I said, I never like to throw anything away. I use the liquid of the olives from a jar of olive in my cooking, or even to season if I'm doing a bread in the morning with some avocado. I might put a little teaspoon of the brine onto that mixture, and it adds flavor and a little salty taste. So the olives go into the recipe, and I have 1/3 cup of olives that go in here. These could be chopped as well if you want to chop them. Some people do like things chopped more. Okay, the next ingredient that goes in are our fresh herbs. You could also add some pepper if you want, like freshly ground pepper. I don't think you need it because we have so many herbs and radishes and onions and so many things going on. I personally don't add any salt or pepper, but you can. So the next ingredients are the ingredients from before we put our lettuce, of course, are the ingredients from our farm, which Melissa told us all about, which is fresh basil and parsley. And I like to keep them in water, and I change the water every 2 days. Not as beautiful as pulling it right out of the land from the NYU Urban Farm, but we're there. We're getting there. It's pretty fresh. I do have some fresh herbs in my garden here as well. So with the fresh herbs, this recipe says 2 tablespoons of fresh basil and 2 tablespoons of flat leaf parsley, which I chopped here for you. But I also have some that was not pre-chopped. And when you do, there's a lot of discussion about, can you chop basil? Should it be torn? Do you release the oils and the aroma if you cut it versus if you tear it? And I'm going to put these herbs in the salad here. The answer to that is very personal, because, some chefs will tell you it doesn't make a difference. You can cut, you can tear. Other chefs will tell you that it's better to cut. It releases the aroma. And I've heard that if you cut basil, you're oxidizing the basil. Whatever works for you, I tend to chop it. So that's fine for me. Hopefully that's good for you. Whatever you feel comfortable doing. When you're using your herbs, just make sure you take the stems off. So cut, you want to pull away those stems, and those could be tossed. I know I keep saying don't toss anything, but those can be tossed. And then it's very easy, again, to chop herbs and then add them into your salad. I'm actually going to add these in as well, because I love lots of herbs. More herbs, the better, because to me, it's like another salad green. Okay, so now we have all of our ingredients, and we need to add our salad greens, which are over here. And salad greens, again, there's so many varieties and so many choices. If you can't grow your own salad greens, I like a mix of, these are called super greens. I just love a mix of little baby leaf greens, spinach and baby kale and baby chard. This has lots of interesting different mixes. I love Swiss chard and arugula as well. So this has a little bit of everything. So that goes into our salad bowl. And, people ask me all the time, should we clean those greens that say triple washed? I tend to clean them, and I did clean these. And I use a salad spinner, and let them dry. So really, it's up to you. I just feel safer to clean them again. Okay. So now, boy, our salad is growing. We have everything except for our bread, and we need to put that in because it just would not be the same without our pane, right, or bread. So that's going to go in. This is looking really good. I'll show it to you. I hope everybody has this delicious salad going so they can enjoy it for their next meal, like I am going to. Can everybody see that? Looks so good. It smells amazing just from those herbs. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have to make sure that it is tossed really well. And I think we're ready to dig in. Is everybody ready to try it? Okay, I'm going to try it. Let's see. I do have a fork here. Wow, that's really good. It's delicious. I really thank everybody for joining me today. And I love NYU. It's my alma mater. It's where I went to graduate school. Really special people there, professors. The person who wrote the foreword of my book is one of my favorite people. And she was a very important professor in my life from NYU. Her name is Dr. Judith Gilbride. She's retired recently, but she is always in my heart. NYU is always in my heart. She allowed me to grow and was a lot responsible for the person I am. She was a great mentor to me as a registered dietitian. We were both registered dietitians, nutritionists. I always recommend to seek the advice of a registered dietitian, culinary nutritionist when you want to learn about food and eating healthy. Everybody's an individual. Everybody has individual needs, and there's not one specific diet that's right for everybody. Some people have lactose intolerance, or they have history of, family genetic issues or whatever it may be, likes, dislikes, cultural differences. And these are all considerations. And sometimes people just need help. It's important to seek the advice of the right person, the right health professional. And even though I talk a lot about the Mediterranean diet and eating healthy, I look at other cultures to really understand why and how they eat, and the diversity of foods, and we have so many foods available to us. It's just, sometimes difficult to figure out what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be eating. Back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the Mediterranean areas, they walked 9 miles a day. They had just very limited choices because they ate very locally, seafood from the ocean and what they grew locally. And they made their fresh cheeses from their milk, from their goats. And today, although the Mediterranean diet has all these wonderful, teaches us a lot about healthy eating, we have so many choices. So sometimes, again, it's confusing. And if you are a health professional watching today, or if you are really interested in the Mediterranean diet and you want to go to Italy, Southern Italy, the first trips are going to be in October of 2022. Please reach out. I can tell you more about it. There'll be an itinerary posted very shortly at worldrd.com. That's like the world, and then RD, like registered dietitian.com. And you can sign up for recipes there, lots of nutrition news and information. If you're interested in my book, it's available at Amazon, and I just did an updated version of the book. It's an ebook, and it has even more updated information and wonderful recipes, and you can buy it as a Kindle book on Amazon. So thank you all for joining me today. And I would love to talk more about, any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Layne, and thank you so much, Melissa. There are some great questions in the chat, which I might direct to some of those. And I have a whole bunch of questions myself as well. One of our guests, Stephen, was asking about, there's so much buzz around EVOO, extra virgin olive oil. And if olive oils are blended from more than one country, are there chances that it's no longer extra virgin?
That's a really good question. And I mean, one thing that we need to really think about or know about olive oil is that olive oil is not a product that is something that should be stored for a long period of time. It needs to be fresh. So one of the most important things is that you check the date of harvest, and it can only last about 18 months, and it has to be stored in a cool, dry place. Also, the question about how do we know about if it's EVOO or extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin in Italy and in other countries means that it's the first pressing of the olives, and it's cold pressed. If you came onto the tours that I run, we go in the fall so that we can see the harvest and we can taste it and see exactly how it's all done. It's amazing that it's just mechanically, the olives go into a press, they're mechanically pressed, and out comes this liquid gold. It's like magic, and the flavors are incredible. But again, they change based on the age of the olives and the variety of the olives and the weather conditions and the soil conditions. Like any other type of crop, there's always variation, and it's going to change from year to year. I mean, even if you buy a single origin olive oil this year, it may change next year because maybe the climate's changed. Maybe it's a little bit hotter. Maybe they harvested a little bit sooner, and so you're going to get different tastes. And the tastes all come from the terroir, the land, what's the climate, the variety. But extra virgin olive oil, again, is a process.
Great. There was a really interesting comment I super appreciated from Paula, who was saying if you don't want to toss herb stems or other unused vegetable parts, to put them in a compost pile. And so, Melissa, I was wondering if you could maybe give some suggestions. You are, of course, a master composter and teach it, but if somebody, I don't know, maybe some hints on somebody who might want to get involved in composting, or if they don't have the room for it, what they might do with their leftover scraps?
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I will always kind of push the idea of composting, but a lot of us don't, especially if we're in an urban area, we don't have space for a huge compost bin. Like the system that we have on the farm is a 3-bin system, which are like 3 feet by 3 feet, and just in in Manhattan or Brooklyn, wherever you are in an urban area, you might not have that space. So I also saw that in the comments, they mentioned about having a worm bin. So that's actually something, and some of you might be like, oh, that's gross. I might not want to keep worms in my apartment, but it's actually a way, especially if you have kids, it's a great way to be able to compost some of those scraps. So you could just get a little container and you get red wiggler worms and you can put those scraps in there. Or Layne, also, I'm sure you've kind of done this before, or Jenny, the idea of, saving some of those scraps and freezing it and turning it into a stock or something. Or another thing that, if worms aren't really your thing, especially here in New York, we have many farmers markets that have food scrap collection bins so that they could be composted. So a lot of times what we do is we just take those scraps, put them in a bag or something like that in the freezer. And then when we're ready to go to the farmer's market on the weekend, because who doesn't love going to the farmer's market on the weekend? We then also bring our food scraps. So that's a great way just to kind of, recycle that material. And if you create your own compost, you can put it back in your garden. It's free. And it's just a way to kind of create this closed loop cycle. So yeah, I noticed that comment too, and I thought it was really great. But yeah, so thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. I was wondering, Jessica had a comment, which I think, Layne, if you could maybe help us out with this. Jessica wants to know if there are suggestions for another protein to use in place of tuna for somebody who might be a vegetarian.
Oh yeah, you don't even need to use the tuna. You can make this salad just with the chickpeas and you have your vegan protein, right? Or if you're a vegetarian, you can substitute fresh mozzarella cheese, right? Just get a nice ball of fresh mozzarella, dice it up and add that in. So it could go vegan or it can go vegetarian, right? And you could also use other beans, whatever beans you like. There's so many varieties of beans out there, dried beans, canned beans, aseptically packed beans. I mean, sky's the limit. It's always about being creative. Really, I really believe that everybody has their unique artistic food culinary creativity. So whatever you like to add, you should try it and do it.
Great. Layne, you spoke a lot about olive oil, but I thought we could just switch gears and talk a little bit about vinegar. One of the questions that one of our friends and colleagues had was asking if vinegar goes bad. We all have jars that have been in our closet for decades. Can vinegar go bad?
It really doesn't go bad. Olive oil goes bad, but vinegar doesn't go bad. It may have some sedimentation and it may get cloudy, or you may even see like a little mother growing in there, because it's fermented, right? But it's not, what I've read and what I've learned is that it does not go bad. And you could even, you don't need to refrigerate it. Now there's so many different, think about like the balsamic vinegars that have been aged for 20 years. I mean, they're so expensive and they taste so, they're so complex in flavor from the aging process. So, so the answer is they don't go bad.
That's, I'm sure, very good to know for a lot of people who haven't cleaned out their closets in a while. So Melissa, on the vinegar conversation, I know that you pickle quite a lot. And are there other things, when we say pickles, we think of cucumbers that are pickled. And obviously Layne did her pickled onions, which are delicious. What other vegetables can people pickle? Or what other vegetables do you grow on the farm that you pickle?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you're mentioning pickling, because actually in the class that I taught today, in the Introduction to Urban Agriculture, we were doing our pickling class today, which is kind of amazing. And so I love having, and my students are at home right now. We're not actually able to be on the farm. We're all coming back in the fall, which is really exciting. But I love to see what my students also see, like what to pickle. And so, garlic, onions, beets, carrots, peppers, kind of the sky's the limit with pickling. I remember when we were doing classes on the farm, we were even doing green cherry tomatoes. So tomatoes that weren't necessarily ripe yet. And we were pickling those, and the students really, really love those. So I really feel like the sky is kind of the limit with pickling. And again, it's like pickling is also kind of creating your own recipe. So, and it is another way of, storing your harvests and things like that. So I'd really say the sky's the limit. It's really like your preference of what you like to eat and what you want to experiment with. So yeah, so what's in season right now? I mean, we did pickle cucumbers today, but yeah, like we could pickle maybe garlic scapes would be great to start pickling right now, because they're totally seasonal. And so maybe we want to keep on eating garlic scapes, so pickle them, and then you could eat them later in the season. So that's one thing right now that might be fun to experiment to pickle on the farm.
Yeah. Layne, what vinegar did you use with your onions?
Oh, I use this same vinegar, which is the
Mhm.
organic Cabernet Sauvignon wine vinegar. And you can also use just an inexpensive red wine vinegar, but
Mhm.
not the white. I don't really like using the white. I don't know if
Mhm.
Melissa, do you use the white vinegar, or what do you use? I mean, I just like the flavors of the red wine vinegars, but you tell me about what your experiences are.
I think it depends. I mean, honestly, like when I'm teaching my students, sometimes I do just like do a white vinegar, but sometimes it's kind of exciting to experiment with like apple cider vinegar, or, kind of play around with it. So I think it kind of depends on the day and how we're feeling and things like that. Today I did use more of a basic white vinegar, but I love the idea of using, just experimenting with it and seeing which ones you're kind of interested in, and what kind of flavor profile you like. So yeah.
Or sometimes also just using any vinegar, but adding herbs into the vinegar.
Yes.
So you can sort of control that palate yourself. Layne, I'm
Definitely.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just saying, and balsamic vinegar is expensive too. So you probably don't want to use that to pickle, because you need more, you need a lot of it. So that's also something to think about. I also wanted to mention, as Melissa was talking about being, experimental with different vegetables and the ability to pickle lots of different vegetables. When you're making salads or stir fries or whatever you're cooking, you can also use lots of different vegetables, like even this type of salad. If you don't like tomatoes, or you don't want to use as many tomatoes, you can add red peppers. I mean, there's whatever's in season. I mean, go to the farmer's market or even your local grocery store, and see what is, what looks fresh, what is appealing to you. This is how Europeans cook. I mean, people think, oh, the French, they eat so much meat and cheese, and it's not true. I mean, they eat small quantities of those foods, but they're really excited about going to a farmer's market. And when there are their meals are surrounded by or created based on what's in season. What are those fruits and vegetables that they're getting? And that's how they create the meals over those seasonal foods. Those are important. I think in our country, we became so focused on, the animal proteins as being the main part of our food, and really need to start thinking more about, more of the plant-based foods as being the main parts of our meals, and being more important because they give a lot of nutrition. We don't need as much of the other, and it's much more sustainable, of course, to eat more plant-based as well.
Great. I have two more questions that people have posted here. One, Layne, is somebody was concerned about the Kalamata olives that you were using. if she is concerned about sodium intake.
So, I mean, it's interesting because I use olives instead of salt. And, you know, if you read the label, I mean, even of the, you know, I'm reading the label of these organic Kalamala olives, pitted, and they are made with olives, organic red wine vinegar, and sea salt. And the sodium is 190 milligrams for 4 olives. So it depends on your limitation. So let's say you're having 4 olives in your serving, that's 190 milligrams. And if that's all of the salt that you're having for that meal, that's pretty low, unless you're on a really, you know, restricted, if you have kidney malfunctions and things like that. But I mean, in terms of a normal sodium intake, the basic guideline is 1 to 1. So it's like if you eat 2,000 calories a day, it should be no more than 2,000 milligram intake per day. That's your general guideline for healthy eating. So again, I wouldn't be concerned about those 4 olives.
Okay, we are just about out of time. I'm going to ask a quick question. Melissa, can you do it in like 20 seconds?
Yeah.
What if somebody has never grown anything on their own, but they want to recreate Layne's delicious panzanella salad and they want to grow herbs on their own? Is there some like one little hint that you can give, or one herb that you think is easiest for somebody who feels like they don't have a green thumb?
Yeah, I mean, I would say try basil. You could grow basil in your apartment. You could grow basil in your fire escape in a small little pot. And sometimes it's good to like experiment a little bit first. If the basil plant is starting to go towards the window, you might want to put a light on it. But just that could be great even in the wintertime or something like that, to have that green thing growing. But usually basil is just it's I don't know, it's kind of a tough plant, so it's a little bit it's easier to grow. So I would definitely say just experiment with one thing at a time. Try basil, see what happens, and yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So sadly, we are out of time today. It went by really quickly. I really want to thank the amazing NYU and Steinhardt alumni staff and development, Heather, Jasmine, and Chloe, who are just such joys to work with on this event and all events. And fellow alumni out there, please keep your eyes out for future emails about other upcoming alumni events. They are going to post this video, so if you were following along to Layne, but you didn't have a chance to cook yourself and you want to watch it again, please do that. And of course, obviously, I really want to thank Melissa and Layne and all of you, our alumni audience, for tuning in and joining this afternoon with us. On behalf of the 3 of us and alumni and development at NYU, I just want to wish everybody a joyous, healthy, and happy summer. And as we're coming out of what has been a really rough year and a half, Zoom might be a weird platform, but it has been a great way to stay connected to the university and our school. And for that, I am personally so grateful. So have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. And thank you again, Layne and Melissa. And now I am so hungry and I'm going downstairs and making my panzanella.
Thank you so much, Jenny, Melissa, and everybody at NYU. And thanks for joining.
Yes, thank you, everybody.